Hi, so in this video I want to talk about class length and the ideal class length, and talk about some different class lengths. When I was preparing for this video, I actually read a few quotes about time, and I didn't really find any that were very interesting that I could use in the video. But I did find out that the expression "time is money" is actually a Benjamin Franklin quote. So yeah, and that gets really right to the heart of this topic. Time is money, and when you're teaching classes, in a very simple sense, like the longer the better. But anyway, I'm just going to go through like three different class lengths and look at like the pros and cons of each. When you're teaching private students will sometimes demand longer class lengths, like 3 hours, and sometimes the opposite will be true, like they'll only have an hour to have class. So it's really kind of interesting for me and maybe some other ESL teachers to talk about this issue. So first of all, like, what class lengths have I taught? So I've taught, the shortest class I've ever taught was probably 30 minutes. And that's when I just had like no money. I went to get my pay, and the agency I was working for said, "Oh, didn't you know? You only get paid in the semester. You don't get paid in the summer. You don't get paid in the winter." And so I went back to my friend's coffee shop, and I sort of told him about this, and I ended up teaching one of the staff for like 30 minutes. And yeah, so he gave me, I think, 50 RMB, and I got enough money to get some food and a coffee, and yeah, from that point on, I just realized that yeah, like, teaching private classes, sometimes it can be the difference between having a meal and just going hungry. So that's how it can sometimes be. So I've taught a 30-minute class before, and I've also taught like 3-hour classes, and I'm going to talk more about this 3-hour number later on. But I'll start at the 1 hour. I'll start at the 1 hour mark first. So what's good about a 1 hour class? Well, it flies by. It flies by. An hour class, like an hour class with one student, goes by really, really, really quickly. You'll barely notice that you've had a class. Once you've done like a couple of activities, your introduction and a couple of activities, you'll be really like looking at your phone or looking at your watch or looking at the clock on the wall and thinking, like, how can I use the last 10 minutes or the last 15 minutes of this class effectively? So that's one of the benefits. I mean, at the end of the day, like, people want to move on with their life. So from the perspective of the student and the teacher, sometimes an hour can be really good. Now, what's the disadvantage of that? Sometimes if you're teaching an hour class, you might spend 30 minutes traveling to the class, 30 minutes traveling from the class. So you've spent equally as much time traveling as you have having the class. Planning for a 1 hour class is pretty simple. It's really simple, because you can just have like your introduction activity, a little bit of review perhaps, and then get into the workbook or get into the material that you're teaching that day, and do a little bit of drilling, do a little bit of checking that they have understood, and getting them to produce some of the language that you're working on, and then it's over. It's not going to take you too long to plan a 1 hour class. Now, if you're teaching groups or you're teaching different ages, I'm mainly focusing just on teaching adults in this video, but it applies to all age groups. And specifically, if you did want to talk about other age groups and bigger classes, you're going to find that, like, it doesn't matter like whether you're teaching 100 people or 10 people, or one person, you're only going to have enough time for 2 or 3 activities in that 1 hour block. Because pardon me, because part of the class is going to be taken up with like pleasantries. I mean, you can't just like get into a class like a machine or whatever. I mean, you're going to spend that 5 minutes or whatever, like having a quick chat to them because they're another human being, and yeah, having that natural communication, and then yeah, you're only going to have time for 2 or 3 activities. Another negative of a 1 hour class, of course, is that you're only going to be paid for 1 hour. That's all that you're going to be paid for. So you're not going to make a lot of money from a 1 hour class. That is the reality, and it goes back to that Benjamin Franklin quote, time is money. Also, when it comes to like, and this is like connecting up to like what I'm getting ready to say, what I'm getting ready to talk about later on. Students really value progress. They really value progress. They value progress probably more than anything else. That's what I've realized. Students value progress. They value like that feeling of accomplishment, that they're getting better at what they're doing. Having a 1 hour class, having 1 hour of class per week, it doesn't really ensure that there will be progress. It's kind of almost like a maintenance type of number. So if the student's having classes for 1 hour per week, you can be pretty sure that their English won't get worse. But if they're not doing a lot of homework, or they're not absorbing themselves in English, or they're not using English for their work, it's pretty unlikely they are going to have much progress. It is pretty unlikely they're going to progress at all. So the student is not going to be satisfied with just maintaining the level that they came to you with. I mean, in a certain sense, it is crazy, but the students view progress as somehow related to the lesson given by the teacher, and they might not connect the time with it. They might just, a lot of them might just think, well, this teacher's not good. I've been having a 1 hour class with him for a year. I haven't improved. And that's the teacher's fault. So that is common, like that does happen. So that's one of the negatives, one of the big negatives for me about a 1 hour class. And that's why I've totally moved away from 1 hour classes. Like, I will teach a 1 hour class, and I am actually teaching a 1 hour class tomorrow because it is income, and if you do have time, but I don't have high expectations for that class, and I hope that this lady I'm teaching, I hope that I can persuade her to have some longer classes. Now let's talk about the 90-minute 2 hour class. Let's just go into that, go into the next category. Now 90 minutes, 2 hours is a whole other beast, okay? So with that extra half an hour or that extra hour, you do have time for more activities, and the way you structure the class can be a little bit different. So if you're doing a 90-minute class, you can break at the 40-minute mark, break for 5 minutes, break for 10 minutes. Hope I won't get my mathematics wrong here. You can have a 5-minute break, 10-minute break. If the student's a smoker or they have to make a few phone calls, whatever, you can have that 10-minute break in the middle, and then you get back into it. And that's another like solid 40-minute block. So that in terms of structure, and then the activities, so it becomes introduction, maybe 2 activities, or 2 pages from a workbook, or whatever target language you're focused on. You're doing that for 20 minutes, and then you're moving on to something else for 20 minutes. And that's the way that I like to structure my private classes. I like to keep moving at least every 20 minutes. I don't like to push through anything for longer than 30 minutes because I feel like the students, they really do respond to like those 20-minute blocks. I call it like a pizza class. The class is like a pizza. And I don't want this video to become like turning into talking about class structure and stuff, because it's not about class structure, it's about class length, but it's like a pizza. So each slice of the pizza is an activity, is about 20 minutes. So when you've got that 90-minute period, let's just focus on that. When you've got that 90-minute period, you've got essentially 4 20-minute blocks that you can do. So planning those 4 20-minute blocks is relatively simple. It's relatively simple. And for the teacher, it can be often like less tiring than a 1 hour class, because a 1 hour class, you are tempted to just like push straight through for 60 minutes. Whereas with a 90-minute class, if you do have a break at 40 minutes, a 40-minute class is actually a lot shorter. It's 20 minutes shorter than a 60-minute class, okay? And you're just teaching 2 of those with a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, probably a 10-minute break in between. So yeah, that's one of the benefits of a 90-minute class. Now, charging for a 90-minute class is a bit awkward because you're sort of like, it's not 2 hours, it's not an hour, and it's not 2 hours. And one of the reasons I don't like 90-minute classes, because I don't like to charge, like, for example, in China, in renminbi, if you're charging like 250 or say 300 per hour, you're then charging like 450 for the 90-minute class. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Yeah, 450 for the 90-minute class if you're charging 300 per hour, and obviously, like, if you're charging different figures. Now, it's just nice to say, like, let's say 500 for the 90-minute class, but then I feel like students are uncomfortable with that, because they sort of think like, well, I'm paying more than 300 per hour, so they can reflect on that and think, like, is that 90 minutes really worth 500? Like, they can sometimes think like that. And yeah, I think, personally speaking, I do think it's an awkward number to charge for. It's an awkward number to negotiate, but there might be other people who have a different opinion. I've done it. I've done it for a long time, actually, with a couple of ladies, and I taught them one after the other. So it was actually a 3-hour class with a 10-minute break in between, and I have a lot of experience teaching 90-minute classes, and for the reason of, like, teaching for 40 minutes, having a 10-minute break, and then pushing on for another 40 minutes, and the ease of being able to structure them. Yeah, it does have its benefits. Now, let's get on to, like, the 2-hour class, which is probably one of the most common classes that you'll find. It's like, can you teach me for 2 hours? A lot of people will say that. I want to be taught for 2 hours. I want a 2-hour class. 2-hour class, it's 2 hours. So you're charging 300 per hour, you're charging 250 per hour, whatever it is. I mean, people can charge 200 per hour, like, it's none of my business. Whatever you charge, 400 per hour, whatever, it's none of my business what you charge for your ESL lessons. So 2 hours is simple in terms of charging, in terms of that aspect. Structuring, it's fairly simple as well, but there are decisions to be made, like, do you stop on the hour? Do you stop 10 minutes past the hour and then have, like, a super, like, easy back of the class? Do you stop at, like, 40 minutes? Do you have, I've met people who've tried to have, like, 2 breaks in a 2-hour class. Generally, what I used to do when I used to teach a lot of 2-hour classes is get to the 1-hour mark, have a break, have a 5-10 minute break. I keep saying 5, but really it's usually always 10, sometimes longer. And have a 10-minute break, and then push on through. Because if you do it the other way, the second hour can just feel really draining. Structuring, you've got 120 minutes. That's about 4 or 5 activities, really. 4 or 5 activities. The way that I like to structure my classes. So it's pretty easy to plan for. It's not much more than a 90-minute class, really. It's just probably 1 more activity, obviously, and maybe 2 more, but probably generally 1 more. And yeah, it's easy to charge for, it's easy to schedule for, it's easy to, like, say to someone, okay, from 1 to 3. I mean, a whole other issue is, like, a lot of Chinese people will sleep after their lunch. So do you put it at 1 o'clock? Do you put it at 3 o'clock? Do you put it, if you put it after work, like, what's the rush hour? If you put it in the morning, there's a lot of different factors to think about, but 2 hours is a nice, easy block. I mean, a lot of people can find 2 hours, particularly in that lunch period when a lot of their colleagues might be sleeping. They can find that 2-hour block between maybe 12:30 and and 2:30. My maths is really bad. Yeah, so they can find 2 hours. 2 hours, it's possible to find. On the weekend, it's possible to find. 2 hours is a pretty easy number to find for most people. It's more difficult than an hour, obviously, by an hour, but 2 hours is achievable. Okay, now let's get into what I'm interested in now, which is actually, like, 3-hour classes. Now, I am, like, really on my own in this, but just hear me out. 3-hour classes, I had this recently. I've had this new student, and he told me that he wanted 3-hour classes. And I thought, well, that's a little bit long. Like, that's what I thought. But I always operate on the precept that the student or the customer is always right. So he wants a 3-hour class. He wants a 3-hour class. Okay, he has a 3-hour class. Now, the first 3-hour class I gave him, he's a very unique, special guy. I mean, he's a very interesting man. I really like him a lot. I mean, you can't necessarily, I can't necessarily like compare a class with him to a class with anybody, but he's a dynamic individual, but very dynamic individual. But look, you know, I was reticent about having a 3-hour class. I had this class with this guy, and I thought, okay, that's possible. I mean, it depends on the student's personality. However, since then, I've really got used to that 3-hour block, and there's many benefits to a 3-hour class. The number one benefit from the teacher's perspective is money. You're in the same place, you're still working in the same place, you're there with that one student, and you're making that amount of money. So if you're charging 300 per hour, that's nearly 1,000 RMB, and you've just got it, you know, like it's just come to you, and you've just stayed in that one place, and you've got it. Now that's an obvious benefit, okay? Time is money. Let's go back to Benjamin Franklin. But what is a much less obvious benefit, and one that like has kind of pushed me into the 3-hour territory, and I'm actively insisting on it and advocating for it, is progress. Okay? Progress. When you have that 3-hour period of time, progress is pretty much guaranteed. Okay? It's pretty much guaranteed that the students will make progress given that amount of time. This student that I've been teaching, his pronunciation has improved, his grammar has improved. Friends of mine have also been teaching him. He's been having one class with each of us per week. So, you know, this has been going for about 5 or 6 weeks now. And yeah, like I've seen improvement in an adult over that period of time. Now, I've also been teaching an adolescent, a 14-year-old, for 3 hours for the last maybe 4 weeks. Okay, this student has also made measurable progress. All right, measurable progress in her pronunciation, in her grammar, in her writing. So in all those important areas, and I would assume her listening, but I haven't tested her listening, so I can't necessarily. But I would imagine that her listening has also improved. So I don't want to make this a 3-hour video. I should wrap it up soon. But the students make progress when you teach a 3-hour class. They make progress. They make progress. And when students make progress, they want to keep studying. It gives them that motivation. So what I'm saying to people is, if you're watching this and you're thinking, this guy's crazy, like 3-hour classes, it's not as difficult as you think, because you just basically plan 2 90-minute classes. So you've got 7 or 8 activities, and you're racing against the clock. You time your breaks. I have them on every hour. So on the hour, 10 minutes, on the hour, 10 minutes, and then so 2 breaks in the 3 hours, and then push through. And yeah, like it works, like it gets progress. So it's just lovely. And I have to say, it's really nice as a teacher to be getting progress. Like it's such a wonderful thing. And yeah, it is a funny thing. Like I mentioned this in another video, but you wouldn't think, like sometimes I think I'm just like a mercenary and I'm just like trying to gather up all the money like a vacuum or something. But when your students do make progress, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's a very, very nice feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. And you pretty much guarantee that they will make progress when you have that 3-hour block. You do feel tired. Like, I mean, you feel like someone's poured water over the circuitry sometimes, like especially if you do 2 of them in a day. Or I've even done, well, I can't say 3 of them, but I've done a 2-hour class, a 3-hour class, and then a 3-hour class. So I've done nearly 3 of them. You can feel a little bit mentally fatigued at the end of that, but if you're really trying to get progress and you're really trying to make money, 3-hour classes can be an option. And look, I would say to any teacher listening to this, don't push a 3-hour class on someone if they don't want it. It's crazy. I mean, the customer's always right. Most people don't want a 3-hour class. They don't want to spend 3 hours with me. They don't want to spend 3 hours with you, probably. It's just too long. It's just too long. I mean, I haven't found anybody on earth who wants to spend 3 hours with me. well, you know, I've found someone who's willing to live with me, but I haven't found someone who's willing to just stare at me for 3 hours. So it is you know, something where you've got to be sensitive to it, but it can guarantee progress. And that's the end of the video. Thank you very much. Bye.